We've seen in Victoria that even a hard and early lockdown did not work with the Delta variant. The Australian boss of AstraZeneca today warned Queensland that Delta is coming whether the state is ready for it or not. In your opinion, is it just a matter of time before Queensland and WA and even South Australia have to deal with this virus just like New South Wales and Victoria?
Well, it's certainly the case that we will see the Delta variant in other states beyond New South Wales and Victoria. Delta has been a game changer. It's more contagious, it's more dangerous, and it's just a matter of time before Queensland and Western Australia have their own outbreaks. So these states can't delay the inevitable. They need to learn to live with COVID. No person, no state, no country is immune. And the fact is both Queensland and Western Australia are the only two jurisdictions in the Commonwealth that have a double dose vaccination rate, less than 40%. So that's something they really have to pick up on.
Well, on that point, you know, these states that have a much lower vaccination take-up than New South Wales and Victoria, should New South Wales have to wait for those other states to reach 80% vaccination levels before kick-starting international travel? Or should New South Wales and Victoria be able to let people travel overseas when they individually reach 80%?
Well, I certainly think there's a good case for New South Wales, Victoria, when they reach that 80%, getting more free international travel, larger caps on their inbound and outgoing passengers, and that will absolutely enable some of the benefits from being vaccinated to be derived by the people in New South Wales and in Victoria. So I think there is a good case for those states to benefit from their faster and higher rates of vaccination.
Are you confident enough in the borders reopening later this year to tell people that they should start booking overseas holidays for either Christmas or January 2022?
Well, it's not for me to be their local travel agent, Sharri, but what I can say is that those international borders will open, obviously, when it's safe to do so. And the fact that we're making real progress with our vaccination rates do indicate that that could happen sooner than what I had forecast at budget time, which was to say that the borders would gradually reopen from mid of next year. So I think we are seeing really good progress, which should give people comfort that they'll be able to travel more freely domestically by year end and hopefully internationally as well.
Yeah. Treasurer, you gave a very important speech about China's influence on the world and particularly its use of economic carrots like the Belt and Road Initiative to get its way. The Lowy Institute has actually described that speech as the most important one from a cabinet minister this year. The business community, however, has largely been resisting the national security warnings from the Morrison government about China's influence. They've even been urging the government to use more moderate language to avoid getting China offside. Do you think this has been the wrong approach from the business community? And is that why you felt it was so important to give this speech?
Well, I think the business community is waking up to the fact that they do need to diversify their markets. They can't have all their eggs in one basket, namely the China basket. That's why I talked about China Plus. And it is really important that businesses and governments encourage these diversifying markets and diversifying supply chains as well. What I was saying in this speech, Sharri, is that there's an increasing overlap between what are our economic policies and economic interests and our national security policies and our national security interests. And Australia has been targeted by China's economic coercion. Just look at their response on barley and beef and coal and wine exports from Australia. But to date, our economy has been remarkably resilient. We have been able to find other markets, and that goes to the high quality and high premium paid for Australian goods and services. So I'm confident that our economy can continue to be resilient, but we also have to be realistic about some of the challenges we currently face with the relationship with China.
Treasurer, I just want to ask you about JobKeeper. You've been attacked by Labor, the ABC and others who say that you paid $12 billion in the scheme's first 13 weeks to firms that didn't experience the downturn they forecast in order to qualify it, and that $9 billion was paid to firms whose turnover actually increased. Was this a waste of taxpayer money, and can you respond to these claims?
Well, certainly when the Labor Party criticises JobKeeper, what they're trying to do there is to diminish the success of such an important economic program in our COVID response. They voted for it. They even claimed to some that they came up with the idea. Then they asked for it to be extended. Now they're criticising it. Now, with respect to those businesses that didn't have the full anticipated decline in turnover of 30 or 50%, new Treasury analysis that we put out last week indicates that 99% of those businesses were actually small businesses who had on average 4 employees. And just because your turnover was down 20% or 25% or 15% and not the full 30% does not mean you weren't under stress. And in fact, Treasury analysis shows that those very same firms had actually stood down 85,000 employees on 0 hours in the months of March and April. And those businesses were absolutely critical to the economic recovery because between May and September, they went on to hire another 350,000 employees. So Labor, again, is going after small business. We know they can't be trusted in that respect, and therefore I will defend JobKeeper's success every day between now and the election and beyond.
Well, you say that 99% of the JobKeeper recipients whose turnover didn't decline by that anticipated amount of 30 or 50% were small businesses with 4 employees. But looking at that 1%, we've seen companies like Harvey Norman repay 6 million JobKeeper subsidies. Would you like other businesses to act in good faith and make repayments as well if they didn't experience the downturn that they were expecting in order to qualify for the payment?
Well, as I've said before, I would welcome any business that was in a position to repay some of their JobKeeper amounts back to the taxpayer. I'd appreciate that. I'd welcome that. In fact, about $200 million has already been repaid. But those businesses were acting in accordance with the law, and they were under pressure when the economy was in free fall. Let's not forget the images of tens of thousands, indeed hundreds of thousands of our fellow Australians lining up outside Centrelink at the end of March and April last year when we introduced JobKeeper. And suddenly, with JobKeeper, we saw confidence come back into the economy. People were kept on in their jobs, and that fear that was resonating so widely at that time across the country started to dissipate.
Treasurer, I'm not sure if you're across the news this weekend, but the Labor Party has said it will parachute Kristina Keneally into the safe Western Sydney seat of Fowler. Labor MP Anne Aly has accused the party of hypocrisy for putting her in this seat at the expense of the local candidate Tu Lee, who has strong local connections. What's your opinion of this factional power play?
Well, hypocrisy, thy name is Labor. And hypocrisy, as you say, is not just a word coming from my mouth. It's coming from Anne Aly, a Labor member, about her own party, saying that they've got to do more than pay lip service to diversity. And in her words, she has called this a huge failure by Labor. So I think this is very telling. It's very telling that the Labor Party is trying to parachute Kristina Keneally in against the wishes of the local members. And it was interesting this morning to see Tanya Plibersek being asked numerous times to back in Kristina Keneally, but failing to do so, failing to back in her fellow frontbencher. So I think this is a sign of quite deep divisions within the Labor Party. In fact, I think Tanya would have got splinters sitting on that fence this morning, trying to not give support to either of the candidates, anything but. So if this was the Liberal Party, you could imagine the confected outrage from the Labor Party. But when it's on their foot, there's an eerie silence except for the strong words of Anne Aly.
Yeah, it was very surprising and brave of her to speak out publicly, that's for sure. Look, Treasurer, final question. As the number one ticket holder, like former PMs Menzies and Fraser, who is coaching Carlton next year?
I hope no one's put you up to that question. But look, there's a few of us who would like to see the former Hawthorn coach, Alistair Clarkson, get the Guernsey, but I don't know if he wants to take it or not. But he's certainly got a wonderful track record in the game. And there's a few other names who are around. But let's hope that Carlton has a better season next year, because we've got a good playing list. But we had a few too many losses this year. And like so many Carlton supporters, I'm hopeful for a better 2022.
There you go. Treasurer, thank you very much for your time this Sunday evening.
All the best.